Standing up in McKinney. This is According to Callus. It is the 8th day of October, the year of our Lord 2024. Some of you out there might be wondering, where the heck you been, Callus? You did this awesome rally about how we need to recruit Oklahoma to help with getting the Texas independence cause online here. And you know what? I did. I left everybody in a lurch. And I don't want to go too deep into the occasion, but suffice it to say, my whole world changed on Tuesday morning. And nothing familially, caused this. It was just life changed. So I had to get my head straight. I had to figure out what was going to be next. How am I going to do what I need to do? Clearly, the podcast is a financial loss. I was always okay with that. But now I have to decide, is it still worth throwing money at this when, quite frankly, I need money? So what does that mean? Well, when I think about the future, what does that mean? So let's get into it. This is episode 699, and we're going to talk all about that before we get there. Again, I necessitate the cause of your assistance, or the call for your assistance. Look, the algorithm kicked the wind out of the sails of this show. I don't know what happened. I don't know what I said. And quite frankly, at this point, I don't care. I've always felt that it was best to put it out there, speak the truth as you know it or as you understand it. There is only one truth, to be sure. And sometimes we as individuals don't have the whole truth. But we should be willing to speak on what we do know or what we think we know. And if somebody corrects us or we get additional information, also be willing to say, yeah, I got that wrong, or my thoughts were incomplete. I try to have always held myself to that standard. So that's why I needed, and I still need, for you all out in the listening audience to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Every little bit helps. If you're feeling particularly motivated, you can rate and or review the program. Do me a solid there. You can join me on the social media of your choice. I have a page and a group on Facebook. I'm a pro at Gab. I drop in at MeWe, and for now, you can still find me over at YouTube. So what does that mean? I've been hinting at changes. The change that I just took upon myself was not planned. Can't say that it was a complete surprise. The economy being what it is, things changed, right? Whatever's happened in my life doesn't compare to the folks that have lost everything over in North Carolina, or the folks that are right now worried about losing everything in Florida. So I'm not looking to equate it at that. I'm just saying the world changed for me. I'm okay with that. And we need to look at, what do we do next, right? That means that we have to stand in the breach, right? Because the entire theme of this program is going to be for the future, right? Thinking about the future. And if you're going to stand in the breach, that means you have to be willing to stand up, get in the way when there's nobody else there, when there's nothing else there, when you're perhaps the last opportunity, the last line of defense. Now, I don't necessarily recommend you doing anything reckless or foolish in that regard, but you also can't run away. You can't give up the ship. You can't just, throw in the towel. It matters. It matters when it matters most, right? We have to be willing to hold the line. We have to be able to stand up, fill the hole, be in the breach, right? I don't know how else to explain it. Things happen, and you need to be there for your brothers, your sisters, your friends, your acquaintances. You need to just be strong. Hey, it's real easy to be strong when everything's going well, but can you be strong in the face of adversity? There's the challenge, right? But if you're thinking about the future, you have to at least be willing to consider what happens when things don't go right. What happens when something bad happens? How do we handle this? Well, I'm right there in the crossroads, folks. That leads me to the next point. If you're thinking about the future, you have to focus on your goals. What are your goals? Maybe you reconsider your dreams become goals when you look at how do I get from here to there? What do I need to do to work a process to obtain this? So it changes the reality of a dream into a goal. You know, there's a dream that I've had for a long time since I've been in Texas. That dream doesn't stop, but right now it can't be a goal. I have other goals that I've got to put in place in front of that. There's things that take higher precedence, and you know what? That's part of being human. It's part of being alive. The world changes and you have to adapt. Now I got to say, been real happy with the network of people I know around me. They've really been there in a pinch. It's been really nice, refreshing, reassuring, whatever word you want to use. You know, and I got to say, about a week ago, well, actually a week and let's call it 9 days, I received a prayer request. I'm not sure who the person's from, but basically seeking wisdom, understanding, and or determining God's purpose for my life. Kind of humorous, to me at least, in the sense that I've had this same exact prayer for myself for years. So it was something to see somebody else praying for the exact same thing. Now I got to imagine this is quite the common cause, you know, in modern America, right? We've had it pretty easy. We've had a lot of good times, and no matter how tough it is in modern America, it's infinitely better than what it is in pretty much the rest of the world and the rest of history. So it's maybe not, you know, something that you stop the presses for when you're discussing this. But I got to tell you, it's important to each and every person that is in this way, right? Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next item, right? So sometimes you need to be willing to just take the win. What do I mean by that? Well, you know, if your world's going to change, better to change while you're still able to do something about it, while you're able to adapt. You can't get everything. You can't have it all. We've been trying to convince people that they can for so many decades, and it's proven out time and time again. I saw a video about young ladies and what their demands are for their future husbands, and when the question was put back on to them, well, what are you going to do? Or what are you bringing to this marriage? Or what are you bringing to this potential mate of yours? They're pretty much speechless. So I'm blessed that I don't have that problem with my wife. I'm blessed that I raised my daughters to not think that way, right? Yes, you want a husband that is a partner. You want a husband that can, you know, man up and do certain things that maybe you're not best suited for. But on the flip side, you're a participant in that marriage. You have to do your part as well. So I would count that as taking the win, right? That I was blessed with that, and I did my best to set up my daughters to do the same for their future husbands. So why do I bring that? What's the relevance of that when you connect that to the other two? Well, if you're planning for the future, you have to be looking at the next generation, right? And when you look at standing in the breach, right, filling the gap, however you want to phrase it, that becomes very important when you have brought up team players, when you have your own children follow suit, when they have a similar mindset. I don't know where that gets lost, but to me that's very, very important. All right, I guess we're going to move on to the next item here. So truth has consequences. What does that mean? Well, you can support truth and want truth all the time, right? And truth is important for the future, but you also have to be aware that there's a consequence to advocating for truth, because quite frankly, a whole lot of people don't like truth. They don't want to understand what's actually going on around them. They would rather, I guess, continue taking the blue pill, if you want to borrow that analogy. So let's talk about the consequences. The United States is in more debt than it can possibly ever hope to pay off. There is no way forward with that debt unless we repudiate the debt, basically declare bankruptcy, or, I don't know, splinter into multiple states and then just the debt disappears with the former government. I'm not sure how that plays out. I'm just saying that's the truth. And the consequence is the potential catastrophic end to the government as we know it. Now, for me personally, I would not lose sleep over Democrat or leftist progressive socialist ideas being forced upon us from D.C., but the uncertainty and the tumult that would follow that would be a severe consequence. Another truth is that, the state of Texas is probably the best state of the 50 states to be in, but as a consequence of that, everybody else knows that too and is coming here. And when they're coming here, they're bringing along with them all the baggage from where they came from. And sooner or later that adds up, and it does not end well for Texas. We'll cease to be Texas, and we're going to be some crazy amalgam of all that have moved here. And, and I know, saying this as a reformed Yankee as I am, that it maybe sounds a little off-putting, maybe sounds out of place. But the reality is I came here to become a Texian, and I left my Wisconsin baggage in Wisconsin. As I look around the cities and the towns within the Collin County, which at once upon a time was the largest, reddest county in the state, we're still the largest red county in the state. We're just not nearly as red as we once were. That is a consequence of the truth that we were highly successful in Collin County. And as the leadership of those cities or those communities basically look at the next quarter outcome as the justification for their actions and their behavior, they're refusing to consider long term because, quite frankly, I don't think they really care. And secondarily, I think they're quite okay with a lot of the outcomes because they're Yankees at heart. What do I mean by that? Well, look, you got Yankees that move here and they leave their Yankee stuff back home. I call myself a reformed Yankee for that reason. And then you have Yankees that come here and bring their Yankee baggage with them. Sooner or later, the Yankees outnumber the rest of us if we allow it to continue. There's not enough time to reform them. There's not enough time to bring them on board to the Texas way. There's not enough time to educate them on why Texas is actually significantly better than the other 49 states, and they're here mucking it up. And I guarantee you the majority of them don't care. They're worried about their pocketbook and next quarter or next week. They don't care about the long-term consequences. This plays out in every school district around Texas. The Republican Party does a lot of things well, but we haven't done a good job of paying attention to what's going on in the local politics. Now, you can make lots of good arguments why that might be, but the reality is we gave up the future to try and control the present. And the fact of the matter is, in giving up that future, it is here now, and our enemies control the present at the school district level. I think if you go to most school districts, you would be shocked to see the curriculum. You would be dismayed to see the hatred they have for Heritage America, or Heritage Texas for that matter. You'd be extremely disappointed at what callous disregard, not my name, but the disregard they have for your children and your grandchildren. And yet we do very little about it. Now, how do we fix it? Well, that's a much larger question. How do we approach it? Well, you have to speak the truth, but you have to be willing to accept the consequences. The idea that there's nothing wrong with the school district is based on the fact that most people love their teachers. And let's face it, most teachers are pretty awesome. But what do we do with the ones that aren't? What do we do with the ones that are a problem? What do we do with the ones that are abusing, manipulating the system? What do we do with the ones that aren't really interested in educating our children? What do we do with the ones that are actually just coaches, which, okay, look, if you want a good sports program in your schools, fine, more power to you. But do you really want that coach playing a teacher, which means they're just going in and doing the bare minimum? Or do you really expect little Johnny, little Susie to get an education from that teacher in that period? I think it's a fair question, but why do we accept this? I mean, I'm not going to cast aspersions, but I'm going to bring up a local school district, Allen ISD. Now, I don't know enough about Allen ISD that I want to cast aspersions, but I'm going to give you an example. And I have firsthand experience when I give this example, so that's what I'm basing it off of. And they were not alone, and I don't know if it's still valid, though I suspect it never changed. But when they're recruiting teachers, and you specify that you are certified in specific subjects, the first question you get is, well, what sport do you coach? Or what sport would you like to coach? Or what sport do you have experience in? Now, I'm sorry, but I belabored under the idea that the school district's primary focus was to educate young people and make them functional adults. So if you're recruiting teachers and you're interviewing teachers and you're vetting teachers, I'm not sure why the first question, or the one that gets the most focus, is the sport that you're going to coach. Now, I'm not going to say there's no value to that. I'm not going to say there isn't, perhaps a legitimate reason why you would ask that. Maybe that's what the school's needs are or the district's needs are. I grant all of that. But I do find it interesting that we focus more time and effort on that than the actual educational process. Secondarily, any questioning of what the school district is doing or the school board is seen as an attack on teachers or attack on the schools. And while I realize they have no other choice but to make that false equivocation, I would think the teachers are smart enough to see through that. And maybe not all, but certainly a large plurality ought to be able to see that, a lot of these parents and grandparents have legitimate concerns, and they don't really have an issue with we or me as a teacher, but with the policies and procedures that are being promoted and protected at the school district level. I've yet to see evidence of there's truth in that speculation because, quite frankly, a whole lot of teachers, maybe not a majority, but a whole lot of them that vote seem to only worry about one thing: their pension or their employment. And again, I can't fault somebody for wanting to protect their job. But again, a vast majority of these reformers, or those that are questioning what's going on, don't have an issue with the teachers themselves. Yet they seem to miss that. They see any critique or any questioning of the district or the policies is a direct attack or affront on them. You would think they would have a vested interest in understanding what these people are wanting to talk about. Likewise, you would expect my fellow brothers and sisters that are showing up at these school board meetings to be quite clear about what they're saying. And the fact of the matter is, most of them are. They're very clear to say, yeah, we don't have an issue with the teachers themselves. In fact, we love the teacher of our student or students. We have questions and concerns relating to the district and its policies. But again, self-preservation kicks in, and what do you know? We get the same people in the same office long term. And then we deal with the situation where we're not getting the same teachers we used to get. In fact, I would suspect that if you ask the average teacher how much time do they actually spend on paperwork and stuff to comply with government edicts versus actual teaching time, you would be shocked. Yeah, but that's where we're at. And you see the very same reformers that are upset about all these policies and procedures would love nothing more than to do away with all that garbage so that teachers could actually be teachers again. And the teachers don't know that. They don't see that, or they don't understand it, or quite frankly, they don't care. I don't know what it is. Likewise, a great many of these reformers would love nothing more to put controls on the bad behavior of children. That quit excusing it, quit protecting it, but have consequences, right? The truth is, your kid's misbehaving and they need to be dealt with. And I can say this, again, from personal experience. I was that kid that was misbehaving. I was that kid that had to suffer consequences. I was that kid that, figured out eventually that there's consequences for your bad behavior. And maybe if you just stop that bad behavior, you'd be able to move on. So I'm at a loss. How do we not be able to communicate this both ways? How can both sides not see that this is what we want? We have a same generalized outcome that we want. And they're hyper-focused on some federal candidate that really has very little to do with what's going on here in Collin County. But again, that's where we're at. So you can have your truth, but you have to be willing to accept the consequences. And sometimes the more bluntly and the more aggressively you speak your truth, the more people repel or recoil from what you're saying. They don't want to be involved with it. It concerns them. It bothers them. It upsets them. They can't handle it. Now, is that your fault? No, probably not. Not at all, really. But that's the world we live in. And what are you going to do? You have to accept it because we have no other choice. So when we're thinking about the future, it goes back to several things that I've said before, right? You can pretend you don't care about politics. You can say I'm not interested, but guess what? You don't have that option. Politics is always going to be around and is always going to follow you. You can say I'm not concerned about these things, but guess what? You're not free from that. You cannot stand. You cannot fill the breach. You cannot fill the gap, if you will. But the fact of the matter is, you can if you'll just have courage. If you'll just be willing to stand up and say, enough is enough. This is what we want. This is why we want it. Let's quit pretending. Let's quit hiding. Let's just be honest. Let's be real. You can do that if you're willing to focus on what the goal is. What is the goal? The goal is to improve or protect that which we already have. And if we continue to allow the leftist progressive socialists to redefine everything and to keep pushing us further and further from what we knew is true and good, we're not going to have much left to save. The problem is the conservatives have failed to conserve much of anything. Yet, that's what we have to work with. And rather than spending all of our time fighting amongst ourselves and arguing about this little detail or that little detail, The goal is defeating the enemy. And you cannot defeat the enemy if you don't know who the enemy is and you don't spend your time and energies focused on said enemy. But that's where we're at. All the time. Being distracted. Now, when we do get the occasional win, when we do get the occasional momentum or change or something that works in our advantage, we have to be willing to accept that and take it and work with it. We need to not criticize, nitpick, and dismiss every little gain that we get. No, we need to capitalize, and we need to be willing to work with those things. If you get 51% of what you wanted, that's a win. If you get 58% of what you wanted, that's a win. If you get 95% of what you wanted, it's a win. It's a better win. It's a bigger win, but it's still a win. And if you're not going to take those little wins, if you're not going to capitalize on those little wins, sooner or later, you're not going to have left much to work with. Or much left to work with? I don't know. We have to be willing to do that. We have to be willing to take what we can get and keep moving forward. But we have to also understand, in that same concept, that it has to be truthful, right? We can't trick ourselves into taking a win that we didn't get. We can't mollify ourselves that something is a loss or convince ourselves that something that wasn't perfect was a loss. No, the truth matters. And if the truth says you got 51% or better, that's your win. You need to take it. You need to be willing to capitalize on it and utilize it for what it is and be willing to accept that. Something less than perception or perfection is a good thing, is so long as you get the majority of what you wanted. Perhaps lower your sights, focus on what's obtainable, focus on what moves the ball, focus on what improves the situation, and take it. Now, we've been all over the map over the last couple of years with competing goals, competing agendas, competing outcomes, and we're a mess. That necessitates good leadership. It necessitates people willing to check their egos. It necessitates people to say, what is the greater good here? And how can I maybe set aside my immediate goal for a greater long-term goal? How can I be willing to work with somebody to get the best outcome possible? And I find that extremely challenging with working with some people. And if we're not willing to do that, we cannot count on a future. Now, I'm not exactly a fan of using the term keep things red. I still have the mindset of the 80s when red was commie, and I can't think of anything that the communists would support that I'm on board with. So, and then Republican seems, well, let's just say a little more milquetoast than I'm comfortable with. And conservative, well, that brand's been tarnished. So that leaves liberty. And unfortunately, liberty is all over the map. There's not a set and defined idea what's behind that. And if you use freedom, that's even worse. So as far as marketing goes, there's the notion that liberty lives here. And I think that was good for its time. I think we need something better. Maybe hold the line, although nobody knows what that means, right? I mean, some of the military people might, right? Or just say no. Yeah, okay. In the context of the drug war, that was unsuccessful, but perhaps just saying no works. I don't really know. We have to sit down and think about the things that we agree upon, the things that we can work on, and what's obtainable. And until we're willing to do that, it's going to be really hard to think about the future. So as I close out episode 699 here, my call to action is not at all related to what I did last week. It's a sobering appraisal of where we're at right now. I'm of the opinion that Ted Cruz needs to win Collin County by 10 points. That means he has to get 55% or better of the votes here, because it's going to be scary close in a whole lot of these big counties. And there's some disenchanted people out there. There's some people out there, they don't like the top of the ticket, or Trump makes their feelings hurt, or whatever. I understand. This election's so much bigger than Donald Trump. This election, in many ways, foretells the future of Texas. So when I'm talking about thinking about the future, when I'm talking about the notion that we have to have a plan for the future, well, I'm going to tell you, step one, the first thing, the most important thing right now for the future of Texas is get Ted Cruz across the finish line. Look, I know we're going to have nearly 2/3 of the Texas House. I know we'll probably have 2/3 of the Texas Senate. I'm quite confident that most of those seats are going to go our way. I know, quite frankly, that the large portion of the congressmen will still be good Republicans, right? Or at least nominally Republican. But the statewide race that matters the most, the bellwether, if you will, of the future, is Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz has got to win. He's got to win convincingly in the state of Texas. He's under a $100 million barrage and assault against his seat right now. If he can withhold it, if he can push back, if he can outperform what he did 6 years ago, hey, we're in good stead. That means all the reinforcements that have arrived from other states have set aside their minor differences. They've said, no, we want to keep it red, quote unquote. We want to be conservative, quote unquote. We want to keep the Republicans in place, quote unquote. We want to, protect liberty here, which is something that Ted Cruz actually campaigns on, protecting liberty, defending liberty. Then I can feel confident that we can know that Texas still truly is the promised land. Texas is the way forward. Texas is the leading light. We can and will instill the values of independence. The guiding force of liberty and justice is independence, is the ability to think on your own, is being free of mind. We need to get that. We need to value people being independent once again. With that, this has been According to Callus. And all I'm going to promise you, ladies and gentlemen, is one more episode. I don't know what the future holds. I can see what we need to do. I know what we need to do. I know what I need to do. But right now, all I can promise you is episode 700. And with that, I will see you on the other side.
TexianPride.com is the destination for Texans who want to show off their love for Texas. We don't settle for mediocre. Our shirts are made from 100% high-quality athletic cotton. They're cool, comfortable, and designed to fit and flatter any body type. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Visit TexianPride.com for your next stylish Texas tee.